The first step is to download your pattern. Select your file according to your paper format and the size you wish to make. Print your pattern at 100% scale. There is a scale test included on the first page of your pattern to ensure you have printed correctly. Trim around the thin black border and use clear sticky tape to piece the pages together. There is a layout included in the instruction guide to help you lay out all the pages correctly. Trim around each individual pattern piece and lay the pattern onto the fabric. You can follow the cutting layout included in the instructions to make the most economical use of your fabric. Cut according to the individual instructions marked on each of the pieces. Pin the centre front bodice pieces together along the straight edge. The right sides should be touching one another. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press well with the iron. Place the middle front bodice piece on top of the centre front bodice piece, matching up along the curved edge. Match the notches along the way to ensure the correct edges are together. Pin in place and stitch using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowance close with the iron and then repeat this for the other side. Place the side front bodice piece on top of the middle front bodice piece, matching up along the curved edge. Match the notches along the way to ensure the correct edges are together. Pin in place and stitch using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowance closed and then repeat for the other side. Match the centre back piece with the side back piece. Pin in place and stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam well and then repeat for the other side so that you have a pair of back pieces. Place the back pieces on top of the front piece with the right sides touching one another. Match up along the shoulder seam and pin together. Stitch using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam open with the iron. You'll then need to repeat all of these steps for the bodice lining pieces so that you have a full set of lining. Place the lining piece on top of the main piece with the right sides touching one another. Match up along the neckline and the armholes. Pin together. Stitch around the neckline and the armholes using a 6 mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. Clip around the neckline and armholes using a small pair of scissors or snips. Take care not to clip into the stitch line. Turn the garment through to the right side. You can see here I'm pulling the back through the front. Once your garment's turned all the way through, give it a really good sharp press around the neckline and the armholes. Open out the side seams of the bodice. Match from the waist edge of the main all the way through to the waist edge of the lining with the right sides touching one another. Stitch using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the side seams well and then repeat for the other side. Moving on to the skirt for now, match the centre front and side front skirt pieces together along the seam. The notches will align along the way. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Repeat for the other side so all of the front pieces are together. Place the back skirt pieces on top of the front piece, matching along the side seams with the right sides touching one another. Pin in place. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you can overlock all of the skirt seams you have just sewn. Change the machine setting to the longest stitch length. Stitch along the top edge of the main skirt at the waist. Don't backtack on either end and ensure you leave a long string of thread at either end, as we will be pulling these threads down to gather the waist. Pull on the threads to gather the waist of the skirt. You need the skirt waist edge to be small enough to fit along the waist edge of the bodice. Ensure the gathers are evenly distributed all the way around the waist edge. Pin the main skirt to the waist seam of the bodice with the right sides touching one another. You'll be stitching both layers of the bodice, the main and the lining, to the skirt. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance along the waist seam. Depending on the fabric you have chosen to work with, you may need to level your hem at this point. As you can see, I'm working with a loose weave rayon, causing the hem to drop out and become wavy. To correct this, I have measured the length of the skirt pattern and marked this length at 5 cm or 2 inch intervals all the way around the skirt hem. Once I connected all the dot marks, I cut along the line to bring the hem back to the same length, nice and level all the way around. Here is the hem before, and here's it after. You can see it makes a really big difference overall. Moving on to the skirt lining. Place the back skirt pieces on top of the front skirt piece, matching along the side seams with the right sides touching one another. Pin in place. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Overlock or zigzag the skirt side seams. Change your machine setting to the longest stitch length. Stitch along the lowest edge of the main skirt. Don't backtack on either end so that we can pull the threads to gather the lowest edge. This time, we will be gathering the main hem to be small enough to fit on the lowest edge of the lining hem. Pull the threads together and ensure that the gathers are evenly distributed along the hem edge. Tie off the ends to secure the gathers. Match the main hem and the lining hem together with the wrong sides touching one another. Pin in place. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Overlock or zigzag the seam. If you are incorporating the tulle underlay in your garment, cut out the tulle to the correct dimensions included in the cutting instructions. Stitch the tulle pieces together at the side seams using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Gather the top edge of the tulle using the longest machine stitch. The tulle must be gathered small enough to fit along the waist edge. Pin the tulle piece in place along the waist edge and stitch it in along the seam allowance. Overlock the centre back edges separately. You'll be overlocking from the top edge of the bodice all the way through to the waist edge of the lining. Open out the invisible zipper and pin each side of the zipper tape to the centre back edge. Change your machine foot to the invisible zipper foot and stitch each side of the zipper tape down using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Stitch as close to the zipper teeth as possible. It's time to stitch below the base of the zipper closed. But first, we will need to mark where we will be stitching to, as we need to leave an opening for the zipper on the lining. Bring the skirt lining up to the waist seam and then mark the lowest point of the zipper where the stitching has finished. Mark this with a light pencil dot. We will then be stitching from the base of the zipper to this new marked point. Pin these seams in place. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. As you can see, I've folded down the top edge of the waist lining by 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch. The seam allowance should be turned under to the wrong side of the garment, and then give this a really good press with the iron. Now, we are securing the centre back edge of the lining to the zipper tape. This part can be a little bit fiddly, but you can see I am matching the seam allowance of the lining to the zipper tape from the inside of the garment. This way, the seam allowance will be completely internal for a nice neat finish. You can also see that I'm making sure that the seam allowance of the waist edge remains folded down when I secure the centre back edge to the zipper tape. Stitch along the centre back edge of the lining, catching the lining seam allowance to the zipper tape on each side. Pull the garment all the way back through to the right side. Now, to ensure the bubble of the bubble dress stays in place, we need to secure the waist seam of the lining to the main garment. Pin the lining at the waist seam all the way around and secure it using a hand sewing needle. Be sure just to catch the lining to the waist stitch line. Finally, turn down the top edge of the zipper tape and tuck it under the centre back seam allowance. Use a hand sewing needle to secure the zipper tape in place along the top edge. This is what it looks like from both sides. All done!